ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Paint Desk Ramblings. It's just me this time, doing a quick and easy episode here. That's the planet list. I'm going to a tournament tomorrow, on the whole weekend, so I don't have that much time to spend on the channel as I do other weeks. But I still wanted to do something, and fortunately it synced up well with the 9th Age releases, because just recently the latest issue of the 9th Scroll was released. So I thought I would do a little review of that issue, go through the content and give you my thoughts on it. It's an easy episode for me to do. It's not a lot of preparation or research and things like that, so it felt very appropriate. Normally I would do the scroll review as a part of the news section in another episode, but given the circumstances, this felt right. So that is what this episode will be about. Hope you'll enjoy it. But before we get into all of that, we have the news section. Turn that on. So we start the news with a Kickstarter from Fireforge Games. They're Byzantine issues. So they are doing a pretty large Kickstarter with quite a lot of models for grabs, and I think they have some stretch goals and things like that, so they can get even larger. The models seem very suitable for, say, the Makar, the 9th Age, and while I don't have any personal experience with the Fireforge Games, don't have any of their miniatures, something that I do hope to change someday, know when. But I have only heard good things about them as a company and of their miniatures. It seems like high quality and yeah, very nice sculpts too. So, as I said, it can be used for the Makar, but I also think you could find a use for them with Infernal Dwarves. So, this is a little spoiler of what's to come in the main topic. But the latest scroll contains a battle report of the Infernal Dwarves, new book, to get some insight and some spoilers from it. And one thing that is mentioned is that the army has a vassal slingshot as opposed to a hobgoblin slingshot. So I think that opens the door for a more varied approach to what the vassals of the Infernal Dwarves can be. So you can maybe have human vassals. And if you go with that approach, I think these Byzantine miniatures could be a very, very good option. So, well, if you're interested in that, keep an eye open for future news on the Infernal Dwarves. But overall, it looks like a very promising Kickstarter. As I said, I do want to get my hands on some of their miniatures someday, Fireforge stuff, but I haven't really found the excuse yet, and I don't really think this is it for me. I have a lot of army plans, but they don't include anything from the Makar to recent time. I will look into it, see if I can fill back it for some smaller kit or something like that. But yeah, I don't know. Probably not. But do check it out if you're interested. I'll include a link down below as usual. So the second piece of news is also a Kickstarter. This time from Yedharo models or studios. They have done Kickstarters in the past. I think I seem to recall a Dwarvenhose starter that didn't go so well for them. But now they're doing Orcs and Goblins, basically. Savage Orc miniatures. They have a very different take on Orc miniatures, I'd say, from most other companies. If I'd say they are fairly similar to what you see in World of Warcraft, so more like just big muscled humans, not as much of the head down below, down between the shoulders that you see in some other Orc interpretations. But it looks like high quality stuff, and if you like that look, it's certainly something for you. I don't think I won't back this. It will not fit into my army at all. So there's that. But yeah, check it out if you're interested. It'll be down below as always. Next, I need to accept some cookies. But next is another company that I want to highlight a little bit. They released a new kit quite recently. I don't know exactly when. I do keep an eye on this company because I really like their sculpts. The company is Knightmare Games. They have a pretty big range of some very old school styled measures. And this latest release is for Bulbus Peppernose and his retinue. It's a goblin mounted on a wolf, I think, yeah. And some goblins in his crew. And yeah, it's, as I said, old school style, very charming. And I can really recommend checking out the rest of the range. They have one thing that really caught my eye a while back was a demon model, which I think would be perfect for a Deceiver of Kunima. So if I ever do a demon army, which I might, that is the model I would certainly get. But they have a pretty big range of orcs and chaos stuff in general. So yeah, check those out. So inclined. I just forgot that I missed something. I usually do the hobby spotlight before I do the news, don't I? So let's take a break from that and I'll do the hobby spotlight now. So for starters, I've switched up my camera. I moved it to a new position, so it's much more zoomed in on what I do. I would really appreciate some feedback on this setup. If it's better than usual setup of showing the whole desk more or less. I think it could be better, considering that I started to add all these other windows with showcases and other cameras and chat windows and such. Not applicable for this episode, but other. I think could be better to have it zoomed in because yeah, you see what's relevant basically. So I appreciate some feedback on that. But what I'm working on is a vampire, a Brotherhood of the Dragon vampire for my Vampire Covenant army. So the model is from Games Workshop, really old 6th edition Blood Dragon vampire. It's out of production. It's a long while. I recently pulled them out of my drawer. Had them there for a long time, but the big project I'm working on at the moment is, of course, Ratted Arms. I have some 15 more rats to do, but I wanted to take a break, finish assembling all of those before I painted them, so I needed something else to paint for this episode. So I picked this guy up. It was an easy option because I'm really happy with this sculpt. I didn't feel the need to do any conversions or things like that, so just pick him up, put them together, and off to the airbrush he goes. So that was very suitable, and yeah, it's a beautiful sculpt, very sharp edges, an interesting armor, doing him in a pretty classical paint scheme of bright red armor that I based with the airbrush. And we're gonna do a black cloak, I think, with some freehand on it. Quite figured out what yet, but probably a dragon. That's the theme of the whole thing. So that's what's on my desk. Again, please give me feedback on the setup, if this is preferable to usual setup of showing the whole desk. I try to stay within this little zone here when I paint. It's a bit tricky, but we'll see how it goes. And also let me know what you are working on, if anything, while listening to this. That is the goal of the show, after all. So that's the hobby spotlight. Now it's time for the news. So apologies for the break from tradition. Yeah. Get back into news. Just need to jump a little area here. Alright. So we had the Bulbus Peppernose and his retinue. And that's about it for the miniatures news. Haven't noticed anything else in particular this past few weeks. So we'll move on to some news from the Ninth Age. So they released an update to the map pack. So this is a document with terrain maps, so you can pick one of 16 and choose and set up the terrain based on the images provided. And it aims to create fairer games instead of setting the terrain up just at random, which can be very random, of course. However, the update is actually aimed to make it less balanced, because I noticed that the choice of deployment zone wasn't that relevant. It was more relevant to get a first turn, or get a choice of choosing who goes first, because sometimes you want to go last. And that felt like a problem, and I can certainly agree with that. So now the new map pack has more imbalance between the two sides, so it becomes more important to choose side, which I think is good. They also have removed some of the worst offenders when it comes to uneven deployment zone. They give an example where with large impassable terrain pieces, so you can hide pretty much your whole army behind it in one corner of the table. So they try to move away from that. Personally, I never use these. The terrain I have available doesn't really fit, and I just prefer to spread out some terrain pretty much at random. So that's my approach. But if you want a more fair setup, this is a very, very good option. I know a lot of people use these. So good to see that it is maintained and updated. I'm sure that will be much appreciated. So we also have another release from the Ninth Age, a new translated version of the Slim rulebook, the main rules, this time in Russian. So the slim chance that I have a large Russian audience, go check that out. This is adding to the Ninth Age quite large collection of languages that they have translated the rules to. That's good. And yeah, if you're interested, check that out. Something for you. But that's gonna do it for news. So I'll switch back off that window. We will focus on the scroll instead. See here. And yep, okay. So we got a little editorial in the beginning, as always. Some notes from Henry P. Miller. Always a good read. He talks about this, the art scroll basically, led up to it. So the first article is a battle report with the new Infernal Dwarfs, so a sneak peek into that book. I'm not usually a fan of written battle reports. I think they can be, or well, in general, I'm not usually a fan of battle reports. I don't listen to many and I don't read many, but I did give this a read. I didn't regret it. It was a fairly interesting battle, and it's always cool to see new stuff teased like this. And also, there were a few fluff pieces hidden in the report, which were really interesting. So basically, they took you are presented with some notes from a slave that observed this battle, and as he talks, you get an understanding of the pieces that were in the game. Not only the Infernal Dwarf pieces, but also the idol of the Orcs and Goblins as the foe. So basically, the theme of the battle is this Infernal Dwarf army coming down on the Warborn to collect some more slaves. Yeah, and yeah, I think to me the most interesting parts of the fluff was partly this note about the idol, Great Green Idol. I wasn't expecting to get any fluff on that for a long while. Nice to see. It wasn't that in depth, but it mentioned what it is, a large idol constructed from various things, and that the orcs seem to worship it basically. But this slave that wrote the fluff pieces, he also mentions that a companion slave of his was a halfling. So I think this is the first mention of halflings in an official fluff piece of the Ninth Age, so now they are officially on the map. We know next to nothing about them yet, but they are in the world, and that makes me really, really excited. So yeah, very happy, very, very happy to see that. The battle report also contains some pretty pictures, the battle, and some close-up of the Infernal Dwarf army that was used, which a quite beautiful army. You can see here. So a long article, a lot of fluff, and pretty pictures, everything you can ask for. So next up is another sneak peek of coming armies. This time for the Red Elves. So we have seen a little bit of them before, previous scrolls, but this time they are teasing with two unit entries, the Manslayer and the Warlock. So these are two characters for the army that are very elite, both of them. Normally you see at least wizard characters, they start on a low level, then you can upgrade them to a high level. But this wizard is a wizard master from the get-go. So that's an interesting design choice. You don't see that very often. You also get a little bit of fluff pieces about particular Dread Elf, and what I think is the war against Dathan. They mention a war in the 3rd century, and previously in the fluff war against Dathan, which is the Dread Elves, of course, their nation. They mention it as a war fought shortly before the Empire of Sonshal is founded in, I think, 201 AS. So that should be that could be the same battle, same war. So it's quite neat fluff pieces to get more details on something that we already know a little bit about. So yeah, I appreciate that too. The Manslayer is a killing machine basically, with counter strike rule, which allows him to cause damage when he passes Aegis saves. So not an unheard of mechanic, but pretty cool to see. And also you get a name of a rule, Alpha Strike, which I think they have revealed is sort of a general rule for the entire army. Basically Killer Instinct, I guess it would place in the current book. I think the rules look quite interesting. Don't really know what to say about them, but yeah, it's good to see that they are revealing some stuff. I've seen that the community has reacted quite a lot to it. I think though a large piece of discussion was the name, especially of the Warlock, and whether it was a gender neutral term or not, and things like that. But the fluff piece in this text describes a witch, which is, I guess, the female term of the same profession. So yeah, I don't see it as a problem. But yeah, whatever. Neat to see, certainly, and quite a lot of fluff. Next we have the community engagement. I didn't mention this before when it was collected. So Henry P. Miller asked the community to make some rules for units that had cool models, but no real representation in the game. Sorry, I need to take a sip of water. And I contributed 2 units, I think, and one of them made it into the scroll. These Lioness Riders, unit for the Hymenelves. We also have a big Yeti and border veterans. And also a big Minotaur on a Karkadon silverback. So some cool stuff, some very cool miniatures, and I hope that some people will be willing to try out these rules in the game. Moving on, we have the result of an art contest that was held about the Makar. And the winner was this piece. See here. So yeah, need to see some other pieces here. Really appreciate these contests that Karak Norm Clansman holds. It's a great way to engage with the community. So I hope he keeps doing that. And then we have more of the Makar. A tactics article by Toronto, I think, yeah. So he talks about, it's a two-part article, next will be in the next scroll. So he talks about the cavalry, mostly, of the Makar, how to convert miniatures for them, and how they can be used in battle. Quite in-depth, I quite liked it, and he really has a talent for converting whole armies, I'd say. So very interesting to see that a lot of kit bashing with different kits and some green stuffing to smooth it out, basically. But well worth a read, I think. Let's scroll through it. So pretty pictures and quite a lot of text. Next we have some comics, as usual. It's about vampires this time, disguise, so yeah, neat. A model review of Ainur miniatures. I think I mentioned them before on the show. They make some cool orcs and troll miniatures, and Henry P. Miller reviews some of their goblins and orcs miniatures. And basically they have a very fine detail on their sculpts. A bit of a different take on the orcs and the goblins. They are more human proportioned than a lot of other companies out there. But very fine detail. So if you like that approach, I personally very much like this style. It's similar to Knightmare games, I feel. A bit of an old school style too, very fine details. And I've been thinking about getting some of their larger models to use as giants and such. Don't know if I would use them as orcs and goblins, but yeah, it's cool stuff. Next we have a little article, Seizing the Veil, a campaign introduction. So this is going to be a long running campaign on the scroll. A larger brush, but it's stuck. Go. And this is a little fluff introduction to that campaign by Proxy Table Gaming. So a good little fluffy read, and hopefully more to come, basically. An interesting series to follow, I think. Next we have a step-by-step tutorial to sculpting. What's it? Are they call it the gnash rooms, something like that. So basically, the gnashers that look like mushrooms. Very nice tutorial. Very cool results. So if you're interested to give it a go, I can also recommend that, yes, in general, gnashers are a very very good place to start sculpting your miniatures. You don't need to worry that much about portions and things like that. You can really go wild with details and things like that. So if you're interested in trying out some sculpting, a good place to start. Sure. So let's scroll through these. Next we have a tactics article by Dan Thomas. He's done several for the scroll. This one is about chaffing. He goes pretty in depth, I think. He's put a disclaimer in the beginning of the article saying that he won't go that much in depth, but I really think he does. But maybe I'm just not good at chaffing. But basically he looks at different ways of chaffing and what units you can use and the purpose of it. To me, the biggest takeaway is that he recommended for experienced players to challenge themselves by not taking chaff in their armies and trying to basically improve their game by not using chaff, because you can get away with it and then you save a lot of points, put into other stuff, and also can end up in games where you run out of chaff and then you need to solve it some other way. So practicing not using chaff would be a really good idea. Like the reasoning of that. And he basically mentions that his own approach is that nothing is chaff and everything is chaff. So in a pinch, any unit can be used as chaff. It's just a matter of what the purpose of the chaffing is, what you're willing to sacrifice. Because basically chaffing means putting one unit in front of an enemy unit and sacrificing your unit that way, but gaining something in return, delaying the opponent most often. So I think it was a good article, worthwhile to read, even if you are fairly experienced, as let's say I am. I'm not by any means a top player, but I have used chaff before at least. I still felt that I learned something. So, well worth a read, I think. Moving on. An article that's an interview between Henry P. Miller and Marcus of the art team. Marcus has been doing some 3D printing of his own models. He designs them and then prints them and paints them. And Henry asks him about that process, basically. Very interesting read. He does some incredible stuff. It's printer. And it's cool to learn a bit more about it. Yeah. And then finally a little tutorial on painting flames by Henry as well. So he goes through a nice little process here to painting flames on his big dragon. But it can be applied on any model, I suppose. So yeah, that's about it. Pretty quick run through, but I hope it gave you an idea of what this latest scroll is about. So the last thing for me to do is to show you results of my painting. So let's check here if I can pull down the lights a little bit. So yeah, this is the vampire. Can I get it to focus up here? Yeah. I finished the red armor. Let's go to the black cloak. I probably won't do that much more on him this evening, as I'm gonna prepare for the tournament. But yeah, it's a fun model. So yeah, that's it for me. As always, please share your results, what you've been working on. Always interesting to hear, and thank you very much for watching. See you on the next one. Cheers.